Hey everyone, and welcome back to Who Shot JFK. For this deep dive, we're going to do something kind of different.
Ah,
Yeah, we're tackling the Warren Commission report.
the whole thing?
The whole thing.
All 26 volumes of it?
All 26 volumes. No stone left unturned.
Wow, that's a pretty ambitious undertaking.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. But, I think it's important because this is the document that everyone always references when they talk about the JFK assassination.
It's the official investigation, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're going beyond the headlines and the sound bites to really dig into what this massive investigation concluded.
Based on its own evidence and testimony?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've got to admit, when I first saw the stacks of volumes, I was a little intimidated.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
But once I started flipping through, I was hooked.
Really?
Yeah, it's like a time capsule taking you right back to 1963.
It's an incredibly detailed historical record. I mean, the report itself concludes that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone.
Right.
But there's so much more to uncover within these pages.
And that's what we're here for, right? To guide you through the most fascinating parts.
The details you probably haven't heard before.
Like, for instance, did you know Oswald used the alias Alec James Heidel?
Oh, yeah, that's a weird one.
We'll get to that later.
Huh.
But it's just one example of the twists and turns we're about to encounter.
And we'll be focusing on what the report itself reveals.
Not on external theories or speculation.
Right? Think of this as a guided tour through the heart of the Warren Commission's investigation.
Okay, so let's start with something that really caught my eye. Oswald's paper trail.
Okay.
And we're not just talking about dry legal documents here. There are letters to his brother, passport applications, even a speed letter from the State Department to his mother.
A speed letter?
Yeah.
What, is that like a telegram or something?
It was like a faster way to send a letter back then.
Yeah.
Like a precursor to email.
Huh. Interesting. So yeah, this is definitely not your typical dry government report.
No, it's not. It's actually pretty fascinating.
So what do these documents tell us about Oswald?
Well, they offer a glimpse into his state of mind.
Like his Exhibit 313, a letter to his brother.
Yeah. In that letter, he writes, "I really do not trust these people, so I shall wait until I'm in the U.S. before I become overjoyed."
Wow. That's a chilling quote, especially knowing what happened later.
Right. It definitely raises questions. Was he already disillusioned? Did he have a plan in motion?
It makes you wonder, these documents, they allow us to trace his movements, his financial struggles, and his increasingly complex political ideology.
We see him bouncing between countries seemingly adrift.
It's like he's searching for something, but he doesn't know what it is.
And that raises a key question for you, the listener. What do you make of Oswald's decision to return to the U.S.? Was it a calculated move? A desperate attempt to start over? Or something else entirely?
Yeah, that's a good question to keep in mind as we go forward.
Now let's shift gears and move to the eyewitness accounts.
Okay.
The Warren report features testimony from people who were right there in Dealey Plaza when shots rang out.
Imagine the chaos, the confusion, the sheer terror of that moment.
Yeah, reading some of these testimonies gave me chills. Like, William Eugene Newman in Warren Commission Volume 14 describes it so vividly, and all of a sudden there was a noise, apparently gunshot. The president jumped up in his seat, and it looked like what I thought was a firecracker had went off.
Wow, powerful stuff.
Right.
These first-hand accounts offer a powerful, visceral connection to the events of that day. We hear from people like Howard Brennan.
Who claims he saw someone in the 6th-floor window of the Texas School Book Depository.
Right. And James Richard Worrell Jr., who was watching the motorcade pass and describes seeing the president get hit.
Both in Warren Commission Volume 2.
Yeah, it's like you're right there with them.
But here's the catch.
What's that?
Eyewitness testimony isn't always reliable.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Stress trauma, even the simple passage of time, can distort memories.
Absolutely. And when you compare multiple accounts, you start to notice discrepancies.
Some details align perfectly, others clash.
Like the accounts of James Richard Worrell Jr. and Amos Lee Ewins.
Both in Volume 2.
Yeah, their descriptions of the shooting don't quite match up.
So how do we make sense of this? How did the Warren Commission decide which testimonies to believe, which details to prioritize?
Well, that's where their investigative expertise comes in. They had to sift through these accounts, weigh their credibility, and look for corroborating evidence.
And one key piece of evidence, of course, was the Zapruder film.
Ah, yes.
The Zapruder film.
A home movie that became a crucial piece of historical evidence. This silent color footage captures the assassination in horrifying detail.
Allowing investigators to analyze the sequence of events frame by frame.
Exactly. The film corroborated some eyewitness accounts, contradicted others, and ultimately provided a visual timeline that investigators could use to reconstruct the shooting.
It's amazing how a home movie ended up playing such a pivotal role in this investigation.
Okay, let's move on to a topic that's a bit difficult, but essential to understanding the Warren Report's conclusions, the medical evidence.
Right.
Volumes 3 and 5 of the report dive deep into the autopsy results and the testimony of the doctors who treated President Kennedy. It's detailed, technical, but crucial to understanding the nature of the president's wounds and the trajectory of the bullets.
One detail that really stood out to me was from Volume 3. A doctor noticed a conical-shaped bump on a bullet fragment.
A conical-shaped bump.
Yeah. That tiny detail, along with ballistics analysis, helped investigators map the bullet's path.
Wow, so even the smallest details can be important.
Absolutely. And this leads to one of the most debated aspects of the report, the single bullet theory.
Ah, yes. The single bullet theory.
Wait, before we go there, can you explain that theory in simple terms for our listeners who might not be familiar with it?
Sure. The single bullet theory proposes that one bullet caused wounds to both President Kennedy and Governor Connally, who was riding in the same car.
Okay.
It's controversial because it requires a somewhat improbable trajectory for that bullet.
Got it. So the medical evidence is there.
But how it's interpreted is still up for debate.
Exactly. And remember, this was 1963. Medical technology wasn't what it is today.
True. They did their best with the tools they had, but there are inherent limitations to what they could definitively conclude.
It's like a medical detective story, trying to piece together the clues from fragmented evidence.
Exactly. And that's a good analogy for our entire deep dive today.
We're piecing together a puzzle, but some pieces might be missing, others might not fit perfectly.
That's a great way to put it.
Now, remember that alias I mentioned earlier, Alec James Hidell?
Oh, yeah.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
This alias appears on a Fair Play for Cuba Committee membership card, a selective service card, and other documents.
Like something out of a spy novel.
Right.
So what's the deal with this alias?
Well, the Warren Commission went to great lengths to verify the authenticity of these documents and to connect them to Oswald.
How did they do that?
They even did handwriting analysis, comparing the signatures to confirm they were his.
You can find all of this in Volume 1 of the report.
Yep. So why the alias? Was he hiding something? Was this part of a larger scheme?
Those are precisely the questions the Warren Commission tried to answer. Was this an attempt to create a separate identity, a way to distance himself from his past? Or was there a more sinister reason?
We'll have to keep digging to find out more.
I'm intrigued.
We too.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Warren Commission report.
We've laid some groundwork, but now things really start to heat up.
How so?
Well, we're moving into the immediate aftermath of the assassination, and let me tell you, the Warren Report doesn't hold back.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's not just a dry recounting of facts. We're brought right into the heart of the chaos, the confusion, the frantic search for answers.
I see. So it's more than just a cold case file.
Exactly. We're not just hearing from officials either.
Oh.
The report includes testimonies from everyday people who were swept up in the events of that day.
Like regular folks who just happened to be there.
Yeah, adding a human dimension to this historical tragedy.
That's powerful stuff.
It is. Volume 17, for example, contains transcripts of police radio communications.
Oh.
It's raw, unfiltered. You can almost hear the adrenaline in their voices as they try to piece together what happened.
Imagine being in their shoes. A president has just been assassinated, and they're tasked with finding the person responsible.
Talk about pressure.
No kidding!
And they did have a suspect quickly. Lee Harvey Oswald.
Right.
The report details his arrest at the Texas Theater, his denials, the mounting evidence linking him to the rifle found on the 6th floor of the book depository.
So they had their man.
Seemingly. But then just 2 days later, there's another shocking twist.
What happened?
Jack Ruby, a Dallas nightclub owner, shoots and kills Oswald in the basement of the Dallas police headquarters.
Oh, wow. I'd almost forgotten about that.
It's a moment caught on live television, an act of violence that added another layer of shock and disbelief to an already traumatic situation.
Unbelievable. It's like something out of a movie.
I know, right? So the Warren Report dedicates several volumes to Jack Ruby, examining his background, his motives, and the security failures that allowed him to get close to Oswald.
They really wanted to understand how something like that could happen.
They did. Volume 20 includes testimony from Officer L.D. Montgomery, who witnessed the shooting firsthand.
Oh, wow.
He describes Ruby emerging from the crowd and firing his gun. It's a chilling account, and it raises serious questions about the security measures in place.
It's almost unbelievable that something like this could happen, especially with a suspect as high-profile as Oswald.
I know. The Warren report meticulously analyzes the security arrangements, the actions of the officers involved, and the chaotic atmosphere that contributed to Ruby's ability to carry out this act. It's a stark reminder of the importance of preparedness, especially in such high-stakes situations.
You're telling me, so we've got a mountain of evidence, conflicting eyewitness accounts, and then this shocking twist with Ruby. It's no wonder so many conspiracy theories have sprung up around this case.
Right. It's like a breeding ground for speculation.
Absolutely. But remember, our focus is on what the Warren report itself tells us, and one thing that stands out is the sheer thoroughness of their investigation.
It really is impressive. They employed forensic experts, ballistics specialists, handwriting analysts, you name it.
It's like a real-life CSI episode.
That's exactly. Volume 3 goes deep into the ballistics evidence, comparing bullets, cartridge cases, using microscopes and other tools to determine if the shots that killed JFK came from Oswald's rifle.
So they were leaving no stone unturned.
They weren't. It's all about connecting the dots, right? Trying to create a clear chain of events based on the physical evidence.
Exactly. The report meticulously documents chain of custody, laboratory procedures, expert opinions. It's clear they were committed to a thorough and objective investigation.
They wanted to get it right. But even with all that effort, doubts lingered, right?
Yeah,
The report concluded that Oswald acted alone, but not everyone was convinced.
that's true. And the report itself acknowledges that some aspects of the case remain unclear.
Like what?
Well, there are gaps in Oswald's timeline, unanswered questions about his motives.
Okay, so we've covered the events leading up to the assassination, the immediate aftermath, and the investigation. But what about Oswald himself? What kind of picture does the Warren report paint of this man who changed the course of history?
That's a good question. And that's what we'll delve into next. Stay with us as we explore the man behind the rifle, the enigmatic figure of Lee Harvey Oswald, in Part 3 of our deep dive into the Warren Commission report.
Welcome back to Who Shot JFK for the final part of our deep dive into the Warren Commission report. We've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
but now it's time to tackle the big one.
Oh, which is?
The lingering mysteries and unanswered questions
Yeah.
that continue to fascinate and frustrate us even decades later.
Yeah, it's true. Even with all the evidence, all the testimonies, and all the meticulous analysis, there's still aspects of this case that remain shrouded in ambiguity.
And that's what makes it so compelling, right? The JFK assassination wasn't just a crime. It was a historical earthquake that shook the foundations of American society.
And the aftershocks are still being felt today.
Exactly. It sparked a wave of conspiracy theories, eroded trust in institutions, and left an enduring sense of unease.
It definitely changed the way we look at the world.
It did. So let's address the elephant in the room,
Okay.
the grassy knoll.
Ah, yes, the grassy knoll.
This seemingly ordinary patch of land in Dealey Plaza has become almost mythical.
Fueled by eyewitness accounts that suggested a second gunman might have been positioned there.
Right. The Warren report, of course, investigated this possibility thoroughly.
They analyzed the acoustics, the bullet trajectories, and even examined the Zapruder film frame by frame.
So what did they find?
Their conclusion was that there was no credible evidence to support the presence of a second gunman on the grassy knoll.
But that hasn't stopped people from speculating, right?
Not at all. The grassy knoll has become a symbol of the doubts and suspicions that surround the official narrative. It represents the possibility that something more sinister might be at play.
And that brings us to another enduring mystery. Oswald's trip to Mexico City just a few weeks before the assassination.
Oh, yeah. That one's a head-scratcher.
He visited the Cuban and Soviet embassies, which naturally raised eyebrows.
Considering his past, that's understandable.
Right. Oswald had defected to the Soviet Union. He had connections to pro-Castro groups. So this trip immediately became a focus of the investigation.
I can see why.
But the details were murky. The Warren Commission had to rely on conflicting accounts, unreliable witnesses, and even gaps in Oswald's own timeline.
It sounds like a real puzzle.
It was. They were able to piece together some of his movements using hotel records, passport stamps, and photographs. But questions remained about his motives and whether he met with anyone who might have influenced his actions.
Did he receive instructions? Funding?
Right. Was this trip the missing link that connected him to a larger conspiracy?
Good questions.
The Warren report explored these questions but ultimately couldn't provide definitive answers.
And that lack of certainty fueled the fires of speculation.
It did. Okay, let's lighten the mood a bit with a slightly more bizarre mystery.
Okay. I'm game.
The Umbrella Man.
The Umbrella Man.
Yeah. This guy appears in several photographs and the Zapruder film, standing in Dealey Plaza on a sunny day, holding a large, open black umbrella.
It does seem strange.
And of course, it sparked a flurry of theories.
Like what?
Was he signaling the assassins? Was the umbrella a weapon disguised as something innocuous? I mean, people's imaginations ran wild.
Wow, so what was the real story?
Well, as it turns out, the umbrella man, Louis Stephen Witt, was just a guy with an umbrella.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Yeah.
The Warren Commission tracked him down, and he testified that he brought the umbrella as a form of protest against the Kennedy family.
Against the Kennedys?
Yeah, specifically referencing Joseph P. Kennedy Sr.'s alleged appeasement of Hitler.
Wow, so a bizarre coincidence rather than a sinister plot.
Exactly. But even with a seemingly rational explanation, the image of the umbrella man remains a potent symbol of the strangeness and unanswered questions that surround the assassination.
I guess some images are just too powerful to ignore.
That's true. It goes to show that even in the face of a thorough investigation, our minds tend to fill in the gaps with our own interpretations.
Sometimes creating more questions than answers.
Right. And that's the nature of historical events, especially ones as traumatic and consequential as the JFK assassination.
We can analyze the evidence, weigh the testimonies, and try to reconstruct the events as best we can, but we'll never truly know what was going through Oswald's mind in those final moments.
And that's perhaps the most unsettling aspect of this entire deep dive. We're confronted with the limits of our understanding, the inherent ambiguity of history.
Yeah, it's humbling.
We strive for clarity, for definitive answers, but sometimes all we're left with are questions.
And that's okay. The Warren Commission report, for all its strengths and limitations, provides us with a framework for understanding this pivotal event.
It challenges us to think critically, to examine the evidence, and to form our own conclusions. It reminds us that history is not a static monument, but a living conversation, a dialogue that continues to this day.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Warren Commission report, we encourage you to keep exploring, to dig deeper, to ask your own questions, and to never stop seeking answers.
Thanks for joining us on this journey through one of history's most compelling and perplexing events. And remember, the search for truth is never truly over. Until next time, keep those minds open and those questions coming.